Hello everybody, welcome back to another tactical fly fisher video. It's been a while since I've put up a video here, but with the busy summer I've had, and I'm sure a lot of you have had, I've had a lot of other things going on with the World Fly Fishing Championship and family obligations, but here we go. We got another one here. We shot this actually back in the spring, at least the footage for it. But it's a topic that I've been asked about a lot. In fact, when I've gone to give presentations at clubs or at fly fishing shows, etc., one of the most common questions that I get asked is, can you Euro nymph from a drift boat? So that's the topic of today's video. Now, it doesn't take a lot of brain power or hard thinking to realize that you can always use the drift boat for transportation. So you can hop out of it and go wade fish and Euro nymph wherever you like if you're on a river where you can do that. But the question that most people are really getting at is, can you Euro nymph while you're floating from the drift boat? The answer to that question is absolutely. Of course you can. So I once didn't really think of this as a possibility either, but back in 2011 I was actually on a float with my teammate Glade Gunther, and I was out fishing dry dropper off the front of the boat, and then all of a sudden I noticed he started picking up about 3 fish to my 1, and I looked in the back of the boat and there he was just Euro nymphing off the back of the boat while I was tossing a dry with a 2 or 3 foot dropper below it. And I was still catching so many fish, and we were in a river that had a lot of cutthroats, and they were eating the dry, so I didn't really care. But the next day we went and floated a separate river where the dry fly fishing wasn't as good, and sure enough I started Euro nymphing right along with Glade, and we were both catching a lot of fish. The thing that I think most people don't realize about Euro nymphing is that it's just another nymphing technique. It's just another form of nymphing. Because it's got this term associated with it that seems foreign, a lot of people just think there's a lot of voodoo or magic or whatever, just strange technique associated with it, but it's just another form of nymphing. If you can go to a river and you can catch fish nymphing in that river, you can darn sure catch fish Euro nymphing. And if you can catch fish nymphing from a drift boat, well, as long as you adjust how you row the boat, if you're the oars person, or how you are fishing from the boat if you're the angler, then you can absolutely Euro nymph from a drift boat and catch fish and have a really great time doing it. Now, as with anything in fly fishing and in life, most often there are some additional caveats, some it depends responses to that question of can you Euro nymph from a drift boat. So let me take you through some additional bullet points, some things to think about when it comes to Euro nymphing from a drift boat. The first thing you want to think about when it comes to Euro nymphing from the drift boat is just picking the right rivers or the right water types to fish. Euro nymphing is a distance limited method, so you can't fish that far away from you, and as a result you need to pick places where fish aren't likely to spook as easily as they might in some other water types. So what are water types you need to look for? Basically the same types of water that you would look for if you're wade fishing. You need runs or riffles or pocket water that have some turbulence to the surface of the water, that maybe have a medium to a high current speed, a little bit of extra depth. If you're going to fish slower moving pools, they need to be fairly deep so that there's enough water between you and the fish that you're not spooking them. Also, rivers with a little bit of color are really good. What you don't want is a river that looks just like a placid canal and that has really clear water, because in that type of water you're likely to spook fish from a long ways away. Another thing to think about from a gear perspective, I'm not an angler who fishes a lot of 11-foot or longer rods very often. I tend to like the lower swing weight and the faster recovery speed, and just kind of the lower weight overall of shorter Euro nymphing rods, somewhere in the 10 to 10 foot 6 inch, 10 foot 9 inch range. Those are the rods that I normally wade fish with. But from a drift boat, if you do have the option to go to a longer rod, sometimes that's the place where you need that little bit of extra reach. Those longer rods, those 11-foot and longer rods, if you've got a good one, they may not be as accurate for technical pocket water on a stream that you might be wade fishing, but they're great for getting that little bit of extra reach, fishing those that foot or 2 further away from the boat. And with that extra reach, you can avoid spooking a few extra fish. So that's, from the drift boat is a great time to pull out that longer rod. And if you want to pick up a rod that's dedicated to Euro nymphing from a drift boat, then thinking about that a longer rod like that is probably the best option. For those of you who have done any reading up on the vision of trout, you'll know that trout have a cone of vision above their head where they can see. They've got a little bit of a blind spot right behind their head where their eyes can't look back. They're blocked by their body. But for the most part, other than that, they have this nice cone of vision from here up. If you can stay below that cone of vision, or if you can only put a little bit of your body above that cone of vision, then you're less likely to spook fish. If all of a sudden you've got your chest from there up or your hip from there up above that cone of vision, that trout is going to register you as a threat most likely, because guess where most of their threats come from? A lot of times it's above their head. Ospreys, pelicans, avian predators, anything that's overhead that they can see clearly that wasn't there before, they're probably going to spook too. If you're Euro nymphing from a drift boat, you're on that elevated platform. If your feet are on top of the bottom of the boat, they automatically are above the water. So you have to factor that in. That's why normally when I'm Euro nymphing from a drift boat, I sit and I'll fish from that position. The only time when I'm going to stand is if I'm in really rough and tumble water, like a rapid or heavy pocket water, in water that has enough waveforms that I'm not really worried about spooking fish, and then being able to stand and reach a little further away so you can get that extra distance from the boat could be a good thing. But in most other water types, if you can sit down and lower that profile so that you're a little close to, if you were wading in that river, you're better off doing that and you'll spook less fish. Now let's move on to how to actually nymph or Euro nymph from a drift boat. Whether you're wade fishing or you're fishing from a drift boat, the basic Euro nymphing technique is still the same. You're still going to make quartering casts upstream. You're still going to manage your slack and your sider angle so that you have just enough contact with your flies to have strike detection, but you're allowing them to dead drift, drift at the speed of the current where they're in the part of the column that they're in. And then you're still going to watch that sider, that piece of bright monofilament or your painted on sider that you have on your leader. You're still going to watch that for an indication of a take. Any little speed up, slow down, hesitation, dip, angle change, set the hook. The technique is still the same. The main difference is that you're simply fishing from a moving platform. So you have to factor that into where you cast, and the person behind the oars has a really big part to play in your success or failure on the day. So there's an interplay between the angler or the anglers and the person on the oars. And they have to get that relationship just right so the boat is going the right speed and the right direction so that the person who's Euro nymphing can make good drifts, accurate casts, and execute the same method that they would if they were wade fishing. So what does the oars person need to do? Basically, the goal of the person behind the oars is to make the boat act as if it was stationary or just slowly moving downriver. That way, the person who's fishing can make at least one or maybe repeated drifts into every likely looking spot that you come across, and you can essentially fish it just like you would if you were wade fishing. The specifics of that are obviously where it gets difficult. Let's talk about boat position in the speed of current that the boat might be in relative to where the angler is fishing, and how the rower and the angler need to work together in order to make sure the angler can execute good drifts and good presentation. In smaller rivers, a lot of times there's not a lot of space for the boat to go bank to bank. You're probably going to have to focus on the center of the channel, rowing down the center of the channel and then fishing to the edges. And maybe you might be doing that just because the water is better on the edges anyway, even in a large river. So in that example, the center of the river tends to be faster than the edges, and the boat is going to be going down that center of the river in water that's faster than where the angler is fishing. So in that circumstance, the rower needs to do a lot of back rowing, sometimes pretty aggressively, to slow down the boat, basically so that the boat either is stationary and the angler can repeatedly fish to a certain piece of water, or the boat is moving downstream slow enough that the angler gets at least one shot or multiple shots at each piece of water on the bank that they come across. And the boat isn't going so fast that no matter what, the angler can't have a drift where the boat isn't pulling the flies too fast and pulling them downstream. So the angler still needs to be able to cast quartering back upstream, so behind the boat. And the boat needs to be going slow enough that when you make those upstream casts, the drift that lands still is able to go faster than where the boat is. So you need to pick a place as the rower where you can back row fast, hard enough to make enough difference that you can slow the boat down so that that angler can actually make those drifts where the flies are able to go faster than the speed of the boat. The other situation might be the reverse. So especially on larger rivers, maybe you're able to skirt the boat down the edge of the river and fish back towards the center. Especially on more placid rivers where you might be focusing on the center of the river if you were wade fishing there anyway, then you can put the boat down the edge and the boat might not travel very fast at all. In fact, you might even get caught in an eddy where, the eddy current is actually going upstream relative to the place where the angler is fishing out in the center. So that's when the rower needs to read the situation, and you may actually have to push downriver. So row forward to keep the boat moving just enough that you're actually covering water. Otherwise, that angler is going to be fishing like they're wade fishing and never moving. But that makes for a very long float in most situations. So you do want the boat to just be gradually moving downriver. And if you're on those edges where the water's slower and the angler is fishing to the center of the water, then you need to gradually be able to row downriver. Okay, so what do I mean in both of these circumstances? Let's cut to a couple of videos from a day of fishing we had back this spring where I can illustrate these two concepts. Okay, right. This whole stretch here is good.
You want me this distance a little closer?
This distance is fine, and then once we get to the branches, we might get a little closer, but I'd rather be a little too far away than too close, because then the boat's over them.
Yeah.
Might be a little heavy. You can let it go for a bit here, because it deepens up once we get to the actual bushes.
Okay.
And that's about where it's going to get good. Okay, yep, hold this. Don't get any closer, Tate. It's going to try and push you there.
Okay.
There's a fish.
There we go.
Oh!
Oh!
So yeah, there's this nice slow water on the bank here, and I'm having Tate really back row hard through this faster water. Tate, if you want, if you can make it there, actually, you know what? Why don't you just put us on that right side where you don't have to work, and we can actually row back up
and then work it again.
Recircuit again. And I can land it in the dead water over there that way. Pretty decent sized rainbow. Let's see what it ate. I have a pinky perdigon and a hair's-ear blowtorch on, and it looks like it took the blowtorch again.
Lovely.
Whoa!
Yeah.
I'll just switch sides here. Back me up just a little bit if you can, Tate.
Okay.
Okay, and then left front is what, yep, left forward. Okay, more.
More on the left forward.
Yep. Both forward now.
Okay.
And more on the left forward again. I got to get closer. That's just a little out of range for this light dry dropper rig.
Okay.
Closer still. He's so shallow, I don't think he'll spook very easy.
Okay.
So you can get up there. Okay, there we go. Oh my gosh. Clearly not.
Over him, bro.
Oh!
There we go.
That was nice.
That was awesome.
And what did I tell you? It's a cutthroat. I knew it was. From the way it was acting, I was like, that has to be a cutthroat. Just hanging way too shallow.
You want the net or do
Yes,
you want me to net
please.
him? Oh, that's such a beautiful cutthroat. That's the first big cutty I've seen of the year.
I would say Euro nymphing from the drift boat, you know, the biggest thing about it is that cooperation and the skill that's associated with both the angler and the rower. And if you both have good skill, you're probably going to have a good day out there. And if you don't, you might struggle a little bit. So factor that in, that you both have a big part to play in the success on the day. So the basics of actually how to Euro nymph from the drift boat, like I say, they're not really any different than if you're wade fishing. It's just working with that rower and that angler to make sure that it happens. But here's a couple extra things to consider about rigging. So a lot of times when I'm wade fishing, let's say on a specific river, I might be fishing a micro leader that's 0.14 or 0.16 millimeter diameter butt section, butt section for my leader. And then I might have 7x tippet for my actual tippet. In that type of scenario, I normally want to step up my size of my tippet and of my leader at least one size in both. So I might move to 0.16 or 0.18 millimeter for my micro leader, and I might go to 6x tippet on my tippet. Or if it's a river where I normally would fish 6x tippet, when I'm floating, I'd go to 5x tippet. So basically what I'm saying is, when I'm float fishing, I tend to go at least one size heavier in the leader and in my tippet than I normally would. And the main reason is, number one, a lot of times you've got large fish that you might be working against currents where the boat is kind of fighting the fish for you because the boat's still moving and you may not be able to slow down the boat enough that you can actually hold on to this fish the same way that you would if you were wade fishing. That fish might go running back upstream, but the boat is still drifting downstream, and as much as the rower tries to slow things down, you can't stop the boat. So you need to have a little bit heavier tippet to avoid breakoffs from large fish and help you land fish from a moving platform when it's not the most ideal situation for you to land fish. Not as ideal as you could make it if you were actually wade fishing and were able to pull the fish into slow water all the time, things like that. Additionally, when you're moving past targets all day long, you're probably going to snag your flies on some sticks, some rocks, etc. You need that little bit heavier tippet so that you lose less flies and less rigs. Speaking of that, it takes pretty quick reaction time on both the part of the angler and the rower. If you do get a snag, it's wise to call out, "Hey, I'm snagged." If you're the angler, "I'm hooked up on the rock," something. Let the rower know so that they can immediately stop the boat or row back and slow down, and then you need to go from that hook set into the snag to immediately going back upstream and trying to jerk that snag in the opposite direction of which you set it so that hopefully you get those flies back out of that snag. Otherwise, you're going to be losing a lot of flies from the boat, probably more so than you would when you're wade fishing, simply because you're just moving past a lot of targets and you can't just go get the flies out by wading over there and getting them off. So factor that in. Have a little bit heavier tippet for fishing for large fish from a moving platform and also to get snags out. The other thing that I tend to do when it comes to rigging is I tend to have a little bit longer tippet. So if I normally have 1.5 or 2 times the depth of the water that I'm fishing when I'm wade fishing, you're moving past so much different water depths in a day from the drift boat that I tend to set it a little bit longer so that I can at least get down and get deep enough in some of the deeper sections of river that I might encounter. And I also tend to fish maybe 1 bead size heavier than I would in the same type of water if I was wade fishing. There again, you're moving from that moving platform and you're not going to get the most perfect drift. A lot of times the boat might be moving just a little bit kind of laterally in the river, or the speed might not be ideal for you to get the perfect drift. And so if you're just a little bit heavier, it'll help you at least get your flies in front of the fish. Even if it's not the 100% most perfect dead drift, you still got a shot at catching those fish if the flies are at least in close proximity to them. But if you're a little bit too light and your tippet's a little bit too short and those flies go over their head and they have to move a long way for them, you're just less likely to catch them. So factor that into your rigging and into your presentation. You may have to fish a little bit tighter line, hold your sighter a little bit higher in some shallow water spots. That's not what I tend to do a lot of times when I'm wade fishing. I want to adjust my rigging so that it's perfect to each location. But when you're float fishing, you may have to fish a little bit heavier and a little bit longer than you normally would. All right, that's basically it. Hopefully, I've answered most of your questions about whether you can Euro nymph from a drift boat and how you can Euro nymph from a drift boat. If you have any additional questions, drop them in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. And then come on over to tacticalflyfisher.com where we've got whatever you need for your own Euro nymphing day from a drift boat, or if you're just wade fishing, that too. Thanks for watching, everybody. Give us that thumbs up if you liked the video and subscribe to our channel. We thank you for all your support here in the shop and for all the support you've given us for the last several years, but especially this year. Have a fishy rest of your summer, and if you're lucky enough to be fishing from that drift boat, give Euro nymphing a try and report back to us and let us know how it goes.